XS Wireless Digital is the perfect wireless audio solution for content creators and filmmakers. Thanks to a 2.4 GHz transmission, XS Wireless Digital is a truly plug-and-play system that allows you to upgrade your in-camera audio with one-button operation. With a variety of configurations to choose from, this entry point into the world of wireless will improve your workflow and will expand the possibilities of how you capture audio for your video. For more information, visit sennheiser.com/xswd.
The new Super 35 sensor that Canon have introduced with the C300 Mark III is quite a big step up from other S35 sensors that they have created before. From the body and the flexibility that gives us in terms of the expansion packs and the interchangeable mount, to the sensor with its increased dynamic range for tackling scenes that possibly we couldn't have tackled or captured faithfully before, I can get more out of this camera. My money goes further. It's as simple as that from a business standpoint. From a creative point of view, it's unquestionably unlocking more creative avenues for us as filmmakers.
Hi, Carl here for ProAV TV. Thank you very much for joining me. You'll notice I am in a slightly different situation at the moment, different setting, if you like. Don't worry, I am heading into the office to do videos as normal. I'm just having a little bit of a gap between going into the office for the moment, just because of some COVID precautions. Everyone's safe, everyone's well, don't worry. Just better safe than sorry. We need to protect everyone in the office after all. So we've set up a quick little, fairly rudimentary, but hopefully it was working. Although I think I've lost the audio to Dan in my ear, literally just as we went live. But hopefully it's working for everyone watching this at home. Basically, I'm being brought in as a Skype guest rather than a normal input into the system. So this is how we normally bring in our guests for these shows, but I'm normally an actual normal camera feed into the system. So instead of that, I'm now being brought in as a Skype guest. So there will be a little bit of delay, and you'll see my quality come and go a little bit as you would expect from a Skype guest. So apologies for that. If we decide to do them from here more regularly, we'll set up a better solution here rather than just bringing me in as a Skype guest. But as a one-off, this seemed to make sense. I'm just going to leave this call and see if I can get Dan back in my ear before we talk. So if you haven't joined one of these Q&A sessions before, the way that these work is they are a very, very informal little chat Q&A session going backwards and forwards. We start with a little bit of information about what we've been doing for the last week and so, the videos that we've put out, any new product launches. So for example, there's the new Sony A1, which looks incredibly exciting. We just chat through those a little bit, and then we'll get straight onto your questions, and I can see them coming through in the YouTube chat already. Thank you so much, Henrik and Chris, who have already put questions there. I'll get to your questions in a minute. Anyone who wants to ask any questions or just join the discussion as a whole, please do just join either on Facebook or on YouTube in the chat. I can see both of you in front of the thing there. So that's good. We have had a exciting week last week, really, with the Sony A1 being launched. The Sony A1 looks like an absolute monster of a mirrorless camera. If you missed this, and I'm sure none of you did miss this, it was by far it's the biggest launch this year, but I mean, I know it's only January or 1st of February even. But it is a monster mirrorless camera. So this is the new flagship Sony camera. It's going to be 50 megapixel sensor. It's going to do that 30 frames a second electronic shutter. We're starting now to see hands-on reviews come out. We haven't had a chance to play with it ourselves yet, hopefully very soon. But around the world, including mainly in America, we're starting to see some people get hands-on with the camera now. And so we're seeing some sort of actual independent user reviews come through. I watched a couple of those this morning, which look quite interesting, because it's always worth looking out for those, because you get to see some of the negatives of a camera as well as the advantages of a camera. It's more than just beyond the marketing spiel. Like, for example, when the Canon R5 was launched, we went on this roller coaster journey of the Canon's marketing going, this looks like the best camera that's ever been announced. And then it released, and we realized that there were some overheating compromises, which is, I still think, very understandable considering what that camera can do in such a small little body. And it looks like this also has some overheating not issues. It's just trying to do 8K in a camera body that is that small. You're not going to be able to record that forever. It does seem to handle it better than the Canon though, but it does cost quite a lot more. So that might be to be expected. But yeah, it looks like a great launch, and we did a whole stream with Philip Bloom going through the camera, going through our first thoughts and reactions on the day of release. So if you haven't watched that, definitely head over and give that a watch, because it's quite interesting to see what Philip thought of it as he was watching it being launched. The other thing we did this week was release this video, which was a bit of a sum up of our equipment that we actually use to make our regular YouTube videos. And not necessarily these streams, but our normal day-to-day YouTube videos, product overviews, camera reviews, all that sort of content. and all of our social media content as well. Anything that's a video on our social media, like on our Instagram channel, is made with this equipment. Now, we had a lot of comments on this video saying that it's complete overkill, and I completely agree. If there's any customers out there that are just wanting to put together their own kit to make high quality YouTube videos, don't use this as an absolute, I should buy everything that's in this video, because a lot of it is massively overkill. Like, you can get by with a camera that's nowhere near as powerful as a C500 Mark II, for example. That is definitely overkill. But that being said, they're good options, but each piece of kit is quite important and makes a big difference to our workflow. And so, yes, we've probably gone for quite high-end options in each of the categories, but I still think those categories are important. And if we look at the actual list of equipment that we actually have, nothing there is that crazy. I mean, the cameras are overkill. You don't need a C500 Mark II or even an R5 as your B-roll camera. Those are very high-end video production cameras. I mean, obviously they do a great job, so you can get those if you want to, but you can certainly get by with much more affordable options for YouTube videos. Same with the lenses, although really those lenses are very good. The audio and tripods, I think, is very, very reasonable and sensible choices. I don't think we've gone for anything too overkill there. The Shark Slider Nano, I mean, that's very affordable. The entire bundle with the tripod head and everything is only about 550 quid. Teleprompter, again, very affordable. The monitoring is another area of overkill. We didn't go particularly overkill. We've still gone for quite affordable monitors, but we've gone for a proper monitor. We've gone for a proper 21-inch SWIP production monitor with a wireless unit on the top of it. So you can do this much more affordably by just using a on-camera monitor, little 7-inch one, for example, or you can use a TV, or you can use a bigger monitor but hardwired, or you can use a more affordable, you can use an iPad with a more affordable video wireless transmitter, like one of the Holyland ones, for example. There's plenty of ways to cut costs there. Although, again, the SWIP monitors and the wireless things do the job incredibly well, and they're not actually that much overkill. Both are very affordable versions. You know, if you were looking at a high-end Sony field monitor, they would cost a lot more than that. And if you're looking at a high-end Teradek unit with the same features as the SWIP Flow unit, that would end up costing you an awful lot more too. So we haven't gone entirely high-end. Again, with the lights, we've got the flexible panels, the SWIP ones, and the aperture ones as the key light. And then that little Lupo smart panel, that is one of my stars, I think, from this setup. The E-Image boom arm, which it really helpfully lets you get a light over the shot without having a light stand in shot. And then that little smart panel is brilliant for not being too wide a beam angle and just being a normal LED panel. So it's very easy to run off batteries and just chuck light out in front of it. You know, nothing particularly fancy, but it's very bright. But because of its focusing beams on it, it doesn't spill everywhere. It concentrates it down that little bit more than a normal LED panel, like the SWIP Flexi ones, for example, would do. And so that means that you can control it a bit more. It doesn't spill onto your background too much, and it doesn't hit the camera lens too much when it's directly in front of the camera and behind your talent in a backlight position. We use that on every single video as a backlight. A lot of the rest of the lighting changes quite a bit, but that stays constant as our backlight and has done now for about 6 months. It's a fantastic option. And again, and then on the post-production side, we've got the SWIT 24-inch monitor. They do more affordable versions, but the reason we've gone for that one is because it does this whole self-calibrating thing, which is so useful for peace of mind that you know that the monitor stays true. So for any sort of video production, I really recommend those monitors. And then the Ultra Studio 4K Mini, just to get a 4K signal out of the computer. So yes, it is overkill, particularly the cameras and some of the monitoring side of things. But I don't think it's unbelievably overkill, and I think the core sort of elements and workflow is something that's very relevant. And an idea that we've been talking about doing is basically recreating this video again, but putting together a more likely YouTube kit. So sort of giving ourselves a bit of a budget, and maybe even doing 2 videos, one on a recommended budget and one on as low as possible. So here's the real entry-level affordable option for what we're doing here on YouTube, and then and we can maybe make the videos with that kit so that you see what the end results are like. That's something we're looking at doing. If that's of interest, let me know. But yeah, that's what the week has been. I don't think there's been any other sales promotions added. There's still a couple going. Panasonic have still got their sales promotion on the S5 and the S1H, where you can trade in cameras for an S5, or if you buy an S1H, you just get a free Ninja 5. That's available till March. So that one's still going, but apart from that, I don't think there's any new ones there. So let's crack on with some questions. Just gonna have a sip of water. Okay, let's start with Henrik. So will the Sony lineup of Tamron lenses be treated as third-party or native lenses on the Sony A1? And Chris says that he's heard the Tamron AF is really good and much better than the Sigma AF on the Sony E-mount. So, I mean, because they're not made by Sony, they would be third party. They wouldn't be native lenses. You're confusing a little bit the two terms, first party and third party, and native and other mount. So a native mount. So they are native because they're E-mount, but they are a third party manufacturer, not made by the original manufacturer by Sony. So they're a third party E-mount lens. So like Chris says, the autofocus on them is very good. I haven't tested the Tamron lenses specifically against the Sigmas and the Sonys, so I don't know how each 3 compare. I have tested the Sigmas against the Sonys, or at least some of those Sigma lenses. And the Sigmas do autofocus very well. They don't autofocus as well as Sony lenses. Sony lenses do seem to be the preferred choice for the best autofocus, just like on Canon lenses perform better than Sigma lenses there as well. But Sigma have come on a long way in the last sort of 5 to 6 years, and their autofocus technology is nearly there, and their optical performance is absolutely fantastic. Tamron, again, not quite as good maybe optically as the Sigma, but very good, and autofocus I think will differ a lot depending on what lens it is, I'd imagine. But for the most part, it should be pretty good. Maybe just keep an eye out for people doing autofocus tests on that specific lens, or see if you can borrow or hire the lens for a little bit if you're really concerned about autofocus before then purchasing. But yeah, I would expect them to be, I mean, Chris says it's better than the Sigmas. If that's the case, then it's nearly as good as the Sonys. I haven't tested there. I can just see Henrik referring to the burst functions. Okay, so I guess by burst functions you mean how well it tracks on the A1. To be honest, with the tracking and the bursts on the A1, I would stick to Sony lenses. In fact, I'm pretty sure I saw in a video this morning that the burst on the A1 is actually limited on third-party lenses. So just leaving the autofocus behind, it slows down from 30 frames a second down to 15 frames a second with third-party lenses, anything that isn't made by Sony. And both Sigma and Tamron would fit that if that's the case. But like I said, I haven't tried the camera yet. That's just going on what I've seen on other people's videos this morning. Yeah, you're saying you're owning the 28 to 75 and the 17 to 28, both great lenses. Yeah, I would expect them to be that slower burst rate if that's just a universally applied to all third-party lenses thing. And I would expect the autofocus probably wouldn't, even if it does let you do it 30 frames a second, with that, you are going to want the best autofocus you can possibly get. So that probably means not only going for Sony lenses, but specifically picking out Sony lenses which perform better than others to try and get the fastest autofocus for stills, if you really want to make the most of that 30 frames a second. Because if you think about taking 30 frames a second and then analyzing autofocus at 120 frames a second, like they said, think of how quickly that lens has to be reacting. You really do need the absolute top of the line equipment to have that work as well as intended. Okay, so Chris is saying, is there any news on the new Tilta float cam Steadicam for the Ronin RS2? No, I haven't heard anything further. I know Tilta have a range of accessories for the RS2, from everything from small little mounting things all the way up to the big float cam, which I think the float cam is the one that fits it into their existing Steadicam sort of arm and setup. I imagine it's not too far away. I haven't had an update from them recently or looked into it. If you contact our sales team, they'll be able to find out from Tilta how long it will be before we can expect to see customer orders come through for that. Okay. Right. Paul M Films. What would be your perfect kit for one-man band corporate shooting, interviews, B-rolls, starting with the camera, the tripod, audio, lights, stands? So small, lightweight and easy to use is a priority. Absolutely great question. There are a whole bunch of different ways you could go with this. There is not one right answer. There's not like there's one set of equipment that's just better than everything else. So I'm not going to be able to tell you exactly the ones you should go for in each one. So a lot of it depends on the way that you shoot and the way you like to work and what features are important to you. A few things that I would look out for in particular for that sort of one-man band corporate shooting. I would look at the autofocus, because autofocus for corporate shooting by yourself is so unbelievably helpful. Just being able to rely on face tracking to do a corporate interview while you're there next to the camera actually interviewing and reading the questions is just such a better way of working than manually focusing. It really, really is, knowing that you can trust it. So that essentially means going for some of the latest Sony cameras, so the FX9, the FX6, the A7S Mark III or the A1, or going for a Canon camera. So most of Canon's recent ones, pretty much all of their current lineup have got their same autofocus technology in them, and all of those would be able to do it brilliantly. Some other brands like Blackmagic, Panasonic, JVC, all those sorts of brands, lots of them rely on either contrast-based autofocus or just have no autofocus. And so for one-man band corporate shooting, I'd definitely be prioritizing ones with good autofocus, considering we've got such good options out there now. And then from then, obviously, you're just looking at the normal things that speed you up, you know, the buttons, the ergonomics. You want it to look like a video camera and be impressive, but at the same time, you don't want it to be too big, because you're going to be in and out of bags a lot and going around a lot, and convenience factors will make your work better. So ones like the FX6 or the C70 would be great choices, because then you've got video ergonomics, you've got built-in NDs, you've got built-in XLRs and audio. Those I think would be my go-to choices, but they're mirrorless cameras. You know, the A7S Mark III, for example, will do that job brilliantly just without the NDs. So yeah, in mirrorless, I think A7S Mark III is probably the good go-to. And then if you can step up to a video body, either the FX6 or the C70 would be great places to start your search. And obviously which lens you pick then goes with which camera system you've got. It makes sense to prioritize a good all-purpose zoom, so a good 24-70 f2.8, something like that. Audio, I would personally go for the Sennheiser AVX if budget allows. If not, go for one of the 2.4 gigahertz options. So there's the Rode Wireless Go, there's the Hollyland Lark, there's the Sennheiser XSWD. All of them are great choices. This one on screen right now is the AVX. that is the kit that I'm actually using right now. This is by definitely my recommendation. It uses 1.9 gigahertz frequency rather than 2.4, so it gets interfered with a lot less by things like Wi-Fi. And if you're doing corporate jobs going in and out of people's offices, you have no idea how many devices are going to be in those offices operating on 2.4. And you might have a set of XSWDs or Red Wireless Go's or Holy Land Larks and never run into problems, but then you might. So I would absolutely recommend, if you can, going for the AVX. Tripods, again, it's my good old go-to E-Image GH06 for most of those cameras, even the A7S. It's a fantastic choice tripod and a good mid-range option, about 500 to 600 pounds, depending on which style of legs you go with it. If you want to get the budget down even further, the iFootage Gazelles are great tripods with the K5 head. You're going to get a much smaller, lighter weight tripod by going with those. So obviously, particularly for cameras like the A7S, which are very small, they're going to be perfect. The trouble with them is that you don't get counterbalance, and you don't get, well, you do get counterbalance, but it's one fixed level of counterbalance. Plus you don't get any drag or control on the fluid head. So it's just set to one friction and one set of counterbalance, and you can't change anything. Whereas for not much money more, you can get the 06, which, yes, it's a bigger tripod, but you get a bunch of different steps. I think it's 3 steps of strength, including 0 on the friction on the fluid head. Plus you get 5 stops of counterbalance. So really lets you fine tune and get that perfectly balanced and just the right amount of friction that you need for good panning shots with whatever camera you're using. Lighting, so just go for a simple lightweight stand, and I really like the flex lights, so I'm using one of those to light me right now. It's just blasting into the corner of this room and being a nice soft fill over everything. It's this exact panel that Dan's just brought up there. So these, I really like these for corporate, simply because they are a great size for convenience ratio. So with lighting, and particularly soft flattering lighting, the bigger a source you can get, the better, which is why big soft boxes and everything like that are brilliant for soft lighting, massive diffusion sheets. But in a corporate run and gun, none of that is very practical. You're going to spend more time setting up your lighting than you will have time with your CEO before you can interview them. So speed is absolutely of the essence. And so these flexi panels, yes, they take a little bit to set up. You've got to put them into the frame. You've got to cable them together a little bit, but it's not too bad, considering, because it's a flexible panel, you can mount it wherever. You can stick it to the wall. You can, when I was messing about with lighting on here, one thing I tried was tying it onto my TV that's opposite here, just to get it flush against the wall with some string. So, you know, you can really work in small spaces very easily with them because they're so thin and lightweight. Plus, because they roll up, you can just fit them in a camera bag. So they are very, very practical options for corporate work. And so, yep, I would go with those, would be my recommendation. If you want to step up a little bit from them and have more creative cinematic lighting, if you like, the apertures are a great choice. The thing I love about the apertures, especially if you go with an all aperture system, is that you can have the key light, the backlight, any fill lights, anything that you want, all with Sidus Link onto your phone, so that when you're there as a solo operator, you can be behind the camera, your subject sits down, you can just look at the frame and go, oh, I wish, actually, they've got blonder hair than I thought they would, and now my backlight's too strong. I'm just going to dial that back a little bit, and you can do it on your phone there without having to get up and say, oh, sorry, excuse me, you just stay there. I'm going to reach around the back of you and adjust the backlight. So I do like those aperture ones because of that for corporate work. Okay, that's enough rambling about corporate. Right, Dakari music. When shooting on the FX6, is it better to record ProRes with an Atomos Shogun 7 than internally in the camera to be able to record more space-wise? And does it have the same quality if so? Okay, yep, absolutely, great point. ProRes is a better, technically, it depends what you mean by better. Most people would prefer you working with ProRes than working with XAVCi. That being said, the FX6 has the advantage of being able to shoot in XAVCi in all frame rates. And XAVCi is a great codec. It's interframe, so it plays back very well in editing software, not quite as well as ProRes, but still plays back very well. Plus, it uses much smaller file sizes than ProRes. And you can, in the FX6, you're going to be able to record that onto SD cards unless you want to use the absolute highest frames per second in 4K. So I think I normally recommend most people do stick with XAVCi, even though ProRes is slightly more editable and, you know, plays back slightly smoother. XAVCi still does a great job. In terms of quality differences between the two, I struggle to see any difference. I think you would have to be pixel peeping to the absolute max to see any difference on the FX6 and between the ProRes recorded externally and XAVCi recorded internally. I don't think there's much difference at all. And of course, because of the size of the Shogun 7, having that as a monitor up on top of your camera is going to add a lot of size and weight. It is a lovely monitor. It's a great screen, and it's got lots of very useful tools inside it. So it is a great purchase alongside the FX6, don't get me wrong. Plus, if you want to record the RAW out of the FX6, this is the only way you're going to do it, and that will be better. Even recording the RAW output as ProRes, that should be better quality than recording the XAVCi internally. But if you're just recording the non-RAW output, so just an ordinary, say, HDMI out into either an Ninja 5 or a Shogun 7, I would say that the quality would be comparable. So yeah, I guess what I mean is you can buy the Shogun 7 to record the RAW output and you will unlock some fantastic image quality out of that camera. But please don't feel that you have to use that to get good quality out of the camera at all times, because the FX6 is a beautiful camera. You know, that XAVCi is a fantastic codec, which a lot is used all the time for professional work up and down the country by big broadcasters. XAVCi is a very common format, and it's brilliant quality-wise. Okay, let's have a little look. Okay, VideoWorks is saying that he has a Zion Crane 3S and a C300 Mark III. It works, but it is too heavy. Please advise. Okay, if it works, then great. I mean, that's a big camera to put on a gimbal. That is a big camera to put on a gimbal. The main problem you're going to have with the Crane 3S is that it's a one-handed gimbal. Yes, it's got the bit coming out the back, I believe. That the Crane 3S? It's got a bit coming out the back so that you can use it sort of in two-handed pistol grip mode like that. But having side grips and being able to root down into your chest or something like that is going to mean that you can support that for a lot longer. The other thing I would look at to see is, do Tilta, do Small Rig, any of those companies make anything that will help you put that onto a arm, because that will mean that you can use it for a lot longer periods. And also, it depends on the sort of work you're doing. If you're just using it as a normal, you know, if you're just sort of going between relatively stationary shots with it and just sort of slight gimbal moves and pans around, you could actually find it's useful to have a monopod with you, so that because it's got a screw thread at the bottom, most monopods like the iFootage ones have got a quick release system, so that you can really quickly attach or detach the monopod. So if you're doing a big walking gimbal move, you can, obviously the monopod's just going to get in the way. You don't want a monopod there, it's just adding weight. But if you're just stopping for a second and getting a close-up from the front, but you just don't want to take it off the gimbal yet, whack the monopod on the bottom, put it on the floor, that's the monopod, and that will just take the weight off your arms a little bit as an operator, just to mean that you can have a little bit of a break. So that could be some ways of dealing with the weight. But to be honest, you're not going to get around the fact that that is quite a heavy camera to put on a gimbal. And so even with much bigger, better gimbal systems than the Zion, you are going to have user fatigue, which is why you see a lot of people on bigger sets with bigger Ronins or Movies and any other bigger cameras on there, like Reds or anything like that. They normally have a ready rig or a vest arm, because both of those will help support some of that weight and mean that you can operate. But even with those, you're still looking at a couple of hours of using it, not an entire day, unless it's a proper Steadicam rig. That's one of the main advantages of true Steadicams rather than gimbals, is that they do let an operator use them all day. Okay, Burgundy's just joined that conversation saying Digiphoto and Small Rig both make gimbal rings, which are a must for the 3S. Also pairing it with a ready rig helps. The gimbal ring is going to be good because that is the only way that you're really going to get one of those 3Ss onto a ready rig. So it gives it a ring round like the old, like a Movi or anything like that, so that you've got something at the top to clip the ready rig onto. It does make it a much bigger, bulkier setup. So for traveling with it and working quickly, it's not ideal, but if you're getting tired using it, I mean, that really is the best way to go. Okay, Digiphoto also makes a product called Thanos, which is nice name, which basically aims to replicate the vest arm and yoke of the Arri Trinity. Interesting, I'll look that up. I haven't seen that one. Okay, right. Palfagid Media Group. Do you have any recommendations for full frame cine prime lenses that fit L mount, S1H and S5? Currently running the IRIX 45mm and 15mm, but need something in between. Budget end, please. Okay, so budget full frame cine lenses, especially in relatively niche mounts like the L mount, you know, by niche, obviously it's a big mount and an important mount, but it's not EF or PL is basically what I mean by that. You're going to struggle. There's not that many out there. The IRIX ones are quite popular. To be honest, I think I would just recommend getting an adapter, because then you can use whatever you like. You know, if you get a PL or an EF adapter, you're going to be able to put any of the cine glass out there on those cameras pretty much. It's something I'd recommend for those cameras anyway, because if you're going to invest a decent amount of money into cine glass, you're going to want it to be able to move with you in regardless of what camera platform you're using. So if you're investing in cinema glass now, it doesn't really matter what camera you've got right now. You know, it could be PL, it could be EF, it could be L mount, it could be E mount, it could be micro four thirds. Doesn't really matter. You want that lens to be an investment for the future, because cinema lenses don't really go out of date. They're something that is the classic investment in the industry, where you pay a decent amount now and it will hold its value. If anything, it might even go up in value over time if they're good glass and you make good decisions with which ones you go for. So it's hard to recommend a full frame cine prime lens on the budget end for L mount, to be brutally honest with you. My recommendation, I think, would be don't invest too much into L mount cine lenses, because they're only going to be useful for L mount cameras. And even if L mount becomes incredibly popular and Panasonic do really well with that mount, it's not like everything's going to be on L mount. And L mount, because it's a short flange distance mount, you're never going to adapt those lenses onto any other, you know, possibly depending on the dimensions to E mount or RF mount, but you would be talking about an adapter that's several millimeters thick for those mounts. And so realistically, you're not going to get those lenses on any other mount, no matter what happens in the adapter world in the future. And so I think my advice would definitely be put your money into EF or PL cinema lenses, rather than all ones with interchangeable mounts is the other thing we're seeing a lot more of now. Things like the DZO Vespids, for example, you can change the mount on them, and some of the Cine Zooms, you can change the mount on them. Yeah, don't get yourself too down into a corner with expensive lenses in the mount that you happen to be using right now, when adapters are out there, and some very good adapters are out there for L mount as well, both EF and PL ones. Lots of companies are making those now. Okay, Lothar is saying, how is the aperture Amrun 100D daylight compared to the 100D Mark II? We are going to be making a video going over exactly that very soon. So I haven't quite had the opportunity to put them side by side yet, because we haven't made that video yet. But the 100D is a fantastic budget option, basically. It does have compromises. Of course, it has compromises. The 120D Mark II is essentially the same light, but done to a higher end professional standard in terms of build quality, in terms of output and control and everything like that. You get the core bare bones of it with the MRNs. So you get the Sidus Link, which is a fantastic addition. I'm so glad they put that in those affordable ones. And you get and actually you don't get Sidus Link on the 120D Mark II because that was a slightly older fixture. So that's actually an advantage for the MRNs. Unless you go for their little bridge adapter, that means that you can connect their older fixtures like that. The MRN is actually even brighter than the 120D Mark II, but a few key differences is that the build quality is not the same. The fan is slightly noisier, although it's not too much of a problem with the 100D, but it is a bit noisier. And the output isn't quite as refined like the reflector dish that comes with it. It has got a hot spot in the middle and rather than an even coverage. And the other one that I've seen people complain about, which they weren't expecting, was actually the minimum brightness. So the 120D Mark II at 1% brightness, if you like, you can get it really quite low, whereas the 100D on brightness level, you put it down to 1%, is actually still quite bright, because that takes an awful lot of clever power management to get these quite bright chip on board lights down to really low levels. And so I don't think they could do that on the budget of the Amaran. So that's quite an interesting thing to keep in mind as well. Okay. Andreas is saying that the mount is a bit of a problem when you use softboxes. What have you found was wrong, Andreas, with the mount on the Amrans? Is it just a little bit loose fitting for softboxes, or do you mean the actual yoke mount and so it droops? Let me know. I do recommend people with the Amrans pair it with the smaller softboxes. If you're going to get a big softbox, obviously you're going to want that's being held up by the yoke on the light, and that's it. So the lower build quality of the Amarans as a whole, I think, would be something to stop you using all the time these huge soft boxes. But if you're just using a sort of fairly lightweight, thin one, so not a deep parabolic one, you should be all right, I would have thought, with the Amarans. Okay, let's see. Dakari Music saying, any thoughts on the quality of the Sony FEC 16-35T 3.5 indie narrative work? Okay, indie narrative work. So the Sony FEC 16-35mm lens is their newest sort of cine servo lens. So they've got the two all-purpose zooms, one in full frame, one in Super 35. So in full frame, they've got the 28-135mm, which comes as a kit lens with the FX9. And then on the Super 35 one, which was the one that came with the FS7s, is the 18-110. So to add to that lineup, they've now introduced this wide-angle 16-35mm lens. Now, it's quite pricey for what it is, this lens, and really what you're paying for there isn't necessarily the quality, although I think it does have some improved optics, more in terms of things like the coatings and the breathing than the actual optics themselves and the glasswork. But mainly what you're paying for is the cine servo part of it, so being able to have a servo to pull the lens backwards and forwards. And are you really going to be using that in narrative work? The other thing you're paying for is autofocus. If you need cinema style lenses where you can use them with a follow focus, and you need servo, and you want autofocus every now and again, there aren't many options out there, and so these are going to be your best options. But I think they're only the best options in that environment. If you don't really care about the autofocus side of the cameras or the servo, I think the quality versus the price is not necessarily worth it. Look at something like the Sigma Cine Primes, or Canon CNE lenses, Zeiss CP3s, any of those sorts of lenses, because you can get an awful lot of glass for that sort of price point. Really, if you're going to want to be spending that sort of level on one lens, it's because you want all elements of that lens and you are actually going to use them. So it just depends how you're going to use it. Okay, I hope that helps. Okay, let's just see if there's any other questions. Okay, Cubase is asking if we got any news on the GH6. No, nothing yet. They haven't done anything with their GH line for a while, and from the little bits of information I can glean out of Panasonic, I mean, obviously they're not telling me anything just yet, and if they were, I wouldn't be able to tell you anyway. But it certainly doesn't sound like anyone at Panasonic wants that GH line to stop being updated. I think they are very committed to the GH line, from what I can tell, and yet they haven't released a camera in a while, which tells me either that they have fairly limited R&D and it's all just been on the full frame options for the moment, and now they're going to turn back their attention to Micro Four Thirds, or it means that they've been working on something quite special for quite a while. And obviously I'm hoping that it's the latter, and that they've been working on something quite special for quite a while, because I do think Micro Four Thirds has its place. I do think the GH6, even if they just update the GH5 to sort of more modern sort of levels of specs, that would be a fantastic camera. I'm very hopeful that they will really give us something above and beyond what the competition is doing, because that's what they did with the GH5 after all. So yeah, I'm very hopeful, but no news yet. I don't even know if they are bringing one out. I don't know whether it's going to be announced next month. I don't know whether it's going to be announced this year or in 3 years' time. I do not know, but I'm hoping it's going to be soon, because that would be nice. Okay, Alex Granton has said on Facebook, looking for a cheap, in inverted commas, 2/3 inch B4 shoulder mount camera. Any advice? Decent low light and 50p are necessary. Blackmagic Design Ursa Broadcast. Yeah, there aren't that many 2/3 inch B4 shoulder mount cameras anymore. The Ursa Mini Broadcast, yes, that's a very valid one. You say decent low light. I wouldn't say that the Ursa Mini Broadcast has that great low light. You can't even go up to higher ISO values above 1600, and even at 1600 it's quite noisy. So what other options are there on the market? Let me have a little look. So there's the JVC, which is the best budget option, if you like. That's very, very affordable. They make a couple. They make the HM70E, and then they make the HM850RE, which are the two main options. And then really, I mean, this is the category that you should go to look at the options on the website are cameras and accessories, and then on-shoulder cameras. And that brings up this, and then you can sort it price to low, and you'll basically see all the on-shoulder sort of broadcast cameras in order. And yeah, which ones would I look at? I'd look at the JVCs just simply because the price is fantastic. You get a lot of camera for the money there, but really nobody else is making what I would class as affordable options other than JVC. There's a Panasonic one, the MDH3E, and there is a Sony one, the MC250. I think the JVC is going to get you a slightly bigger sensor. Let me just have a little look. Yeah, it's a hard thing buying an affordable 2/3 inch broadcast ones. Those are the ones I would have a little look at. I don't know them particularly well off the top of my head, so it's probably best I don't try and point out which one's going to be the best, but have a little look at those three and see which ones tickle your fancy. Philip Williams just saying we've delivered his FX6. Fantastic. It's nice to see so many customers now getting these brand new cameras as they're coming out. The amount of A7S3s and FX6s we've been able to actually get out there to customers is just great to see. It's so many of you are popping up on Instagram and things, sharing with us your new cameras, which is just great to see. I really enjoy it. Okay. Loud and clear. What is the deal with the Komodo and FX6 lack of availability? Is this COVID supply chain stuff, or are these two cameras just that in demand? Thanks. It's a mixture of both. Both of them are very in demand. The FX6 is actually shipping very well. Let me just see if we have, because I know we had free stock of the A7S for a short period of time. Right, no, we don't for the FX6, but I don't think delivery times are that long on FX6. We're certainly getting a lot more of those through the door than we are Komodos. So if you're are interested in buying one of those, get in touch with the sales team and they'll be able to actually get you up-to-date delivery estimates. And the other thing I would say is join a list, of course. Don't just find out how long it is and then wait, because other people are joining the list, and so your place in the queue just goes down and down and down. If you actually get on a queue with the sales team, you don't need to pay the full amount until it ships, but just join the queue, because otherwise it's just going to be a never-ending wait. For either camera, of course, that goes exactly the same deal for the Komodo. If you're interested in one of those, it's the exact same advice. Just join the queue and secure your place, and then as stock slowly comes in, we can be delivering that. But I don't think the wait on the FX6 is too long anymore. But yeah, COVID did hit both fairly hard. But with Red and Komodo, they're built in America and they're in, I think it's in California, and they were locked down repeatedly, which really hampered the factory. And FX6, a lot of the Japanese camera manufacturers struggled by one plant in particular having a big fire over in Japan that happened recently, so that hit availability of pretty much all cameras that come from Japanese manufacturers. So all the Canons, Sonys, you know, a huge amount of the cameras that we sell were hit with difficulties in delivering because of that. Cool. So yeah, apologies if you've been waiting. But yeah, I think that wraps up those questions there. So yeah, if you have any other questions, leave them down below in the comment section and we'll get back to you. And let me know if you're interested in those video ideas that I said at the beginning of doing different YouTube setups based around the same idea of what we actually use, but at different price points, because I think that might be something we'd be interested in seeing. So if you're if you're interested in seeing anything particular in those videos, let me know. But yeah, thanks for your questions. Thank you very much for watching. And if you want to buy any of the stuff we mentioned here, of course, just head over to ProAV. Thank you all very much. I'll see you soon.